Hey guys, I'm here ready to do my little video that everyone's been asking about and for. I have been putting this off all week. I've been really scared actually to do it, and I've been really wanting to do it justice because it's it's very very personal. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about for not only me but also my family. So yeah, please just be nice. That's all I can ask. Um, so I thought I'd tell you guys. I've had to write a list of what I want to talk about because I don't want to miss anything and answer all your questions as well. So excuse me. I thought I'd do a video telling you guys about everything that's happened to me, and then later on I'll do a video more on how I guess, deal with it in day-to-day life, balance working, stop it. My animals are crazy, so I'm sorry if you can hear them in the background. um, basically, I was diagnosed in 2010 with acute myeloid leukemia. It's a very aggressive form of leukemia. I was 15 at the time, in grade 10 at school. Grade 10 or 11? Grade 10, I think. No, I was in grade 11. And I was basically diagnosed. My symptoms were I had just been feeling really tired, and I developed some abdomen pain. My parents took me to the hospital because they actually thought I might have had appendicitis. It was that bad, and basically I went to the hospital, and it's quite funny. It's not funny, but we waited for 5 hours to be seen. And I kept saying, Dad, don't worry about it. Let's just go home. We'll just go to the doctor tomorrow. And Dad's like, no, you're in a lot of pain. We're staying. And, thank God that that we did stay, because otherwise, it probably wouldn't have been picked up for a long, until it was too late. So, they couldn't find anything. Obviously, it wasn't appendicitis, and so they decided to just do a blood test, just to check everything was okay. And they didn't even get us to wait for the results. I think they just thought, 15-year-old girl, abdomen pain, probably got her period, you know. So they sent us home. They didn't even wait for the results. And then 3 hours later, we got a call saying that we needed to come back in. So that morning, I went in, and we had an appointment at the hematology clinic. They told, at the time it was just Dad and I, and they told me that there was a chance that there could be something seriously wrong, because the counts in my blood were low. So basically all the little blood cells that make up your immune system, so my white cells, my neutrophils, and then a lot of my other red blood cells and things, they were all very low, which was why I was getting tired. And I had also been really unwell, just with lots of colds and tonsillitis and things in the months leading up. So they said that was probably the reason as to why. I was aspirated that afternoon, so I was booked in for an emergency bone marrow aspirate, which is where they drill into your hip, basically they lay you face down and drill into your hip and aspirate some of the bone marrow that's in your hips or in your pelvis, and they test it for leukemia cells, basically. Those results took, I think, about 24 hours to come back, but the hematologist said that he was like 100% sure I had some type of leukemia. It was the aspirate was just more about determining what type it was. So after that, the next morning, I guess we were, it was a very big shock. I actually stayed in hospital that night. I didn't go home for a few weeks after that. And, the nurses were so great. I remember I walked onto the ward because at the time Townsville didn't have any, I'm not sure if they do now, but they didn't have any cancer services for children. It was adults only. And because I was 15, I was kind of on the cusp of being treated as an adult patient or as a child. But they did have one or two adolescent oncology rooms, and it had all been brandly new renovated because it was very new to the hospital at the time. Like the walls were purple and they had beautiful TVs and things. And I remember the nurses were so good at their job. They took me to the ward and they oriented me to the ward. And then I remember them walking out and me thinking, awesome, like I've got my own room. Because at home I was sharing a room, and like they managed to turn it around. Like it was so awesome that I was getting to stay at this place. And then I was like, oh shit, no, actually you've got cancer, so this is not awesome. So yeah, that happened. So after the day after I was diagnosed, I stayed at the hospital that night. I was sent for an emergency ovary, I can't remember the technical name of the surgery, but they sent me into surgery to remove half of one of my ovaries, in the theory that I would potentially be able to freeze it, and then later on in life reinsert the ovary into my body and have it potentially grow and be fertile to have children. I didn't have enough time to do an egg harvest or anything like that because my cancer was so aggressive. They needed to start the treatment. We've since found out that the surgery was a waste of time, really. It was kind of new. It was new research at the time, so they did it, but the theory is that you can't put an ovary back into someone's body when it could potentially have blood cancer cells in it. So on my left side, I have half an ovary. It's a little bit of information. So yeah, I made the decision last year to unfreeze that ovary and discard it. So if I do ever want children, it'll have to be adoption, or the doctor said I can carry a child, but I will never be able to conceive one. So I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. After that surgery, I also had a central line inserted into my neck. So you can see I have a couple of scars on my chest. They're starting to go away now from multiple lines that I've had throughout my treatment. I guess the day after that, I started chemotherapy. So it was very quick. I think I was diagnosed. I went to ED on like the Monday. I was diagnosed the Tuesday morning. I had the surgery on the Wednesday, and I started chemo on the Thursday. It was all very quick. It was all very rushed, and it was a lot for our family to take in. I think we were all in shock and didn't really know how to handle it at the time. My first diagnosis, the first time I had leukemia, I received 3 rounds of chemotherapy in the Townsville Hospital. I was very unwell with the chemotherapy, especially the first round. Especially being 15, I was very superficial at that age. I was all about trying to be popular. I was all about trying to be cool, and then to be going through puberty as well. I felt so unsure of myself, and then to have to shave my head was really upsetting to me. I really didn't deal with it very well. I feel really sad looking back on it because at the time I was so ashamed and embarrassed to be going through what I was, and I just kept thinking, I'm not normal. And that was really hard at the time, to try and still, I don't know, I guess I was embarrassed, and that's the only way to put it. And I just look at it now and I'm like, you have nothing to be embarrassed about. But at the time it was really difficult for me. um, I have no photos of when I went through treatment the first time because I wouldn't let anyone take photos. Even when I had shaved my head, the day that I shaved my head. So basically, when you have chemotherapy, your hair doesn't just all of a sudden wake up one morning and you're bald. It falls out. It falls out in patches, and it thins out. So it's most people just once it starts to fall out in clumps, it can be really distressing. Showering or brushing your hair and having it fall out in clumps. So I just made the decision to shave it off. And not to delay the inevitable sort of thing. But I was that ashamed. I had booked this wig woman consultation literally the hour after. So I had this beautiful family friend of ours who was a hairdresser come to the hospital and shave my head at the hospital. And then the woman who still lives in Townsville, and she operates a business specialising in providing wigs for women and men that are affected with cancer. And she came to my hospital room and she bought some wigs, and I was able to try some on. And yeah, I was wearing a wig 24/7. I wouldn't let anyone see me when I was bald. I would go into the bathroom, take my wig off, put a beanie on, and then go to bed. Like I was just so embarrassed about it. And I feel really ashamed that I felt that way now. But I guess at that age you're just so superficial and worried about what everyone thinks about you. So, it is a shame, but I guess it's just how it is. So I had the 3 rounds of chemo. I was declared in remission after the first round of chemo. But anyone who's had treatment knows that you often keep going with treatment even after you are in remission, because they want to try and make sure that it won't come back. After the 3 rounds of chemotherapy, each round took about 6 to 8 weeks between getting the chemo, becoming unwell, and then you're basically, after you have the chemo, it kills everything in your body, all the cells, including your immune system. So you become very, very sick, unwell, you get nauseated, you get vomiting, people get all types of symptoms, and there's so many different types of chemotherapy that people get for different cancers that have different side effects. Like it's just really, there's so many. But for me, the main drug I had was cytarabine and idarubicin, and I was so unwell. I could not eat, I couldn't sleep because I was so nauseated, I couldn't walk, it was just horrible. It took about 6 to 8 weeks per round, and I had 3 rounds. After that, after each round of chemotherapy, they do a bone aspirate to confirm that you're in remission. So I've had so many bone marrow aspirates, and then even now I still get them every year or two, a couple of years. It's gone to 2 years now, but yeah, you still get them very often. They're very painful, they're very awful. I wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy. But as I was saying, I had the 3 rounds, so it took about 6 months for my treatment the first time. After my treatment, they did a bone marrow aspirate, and they tested for a gene, or I think it was a gene or a special type of cell or marker that was in my bone marrow. And basically, I'm not sure, I can't remember the exact specifics, but it was like a test that would tell you the likelihood of your cancer relapsing. And there was like a 60% chance that it wouldn't, and a 40% chance, no, yeah, a 60% chance that it wouldn't come back, and a 40% chance that it would. That's the numbers that the doctors gave us. And they said, so we're not going to transplant you this time because you're in that 40%. No, I was in the 60% because they're saying you've got a 60% chance that it's not going to come back. So we don't want to transplant you because it's, so intense and so awful. It's better than halfway, so we're going to just leave it and see how you go, and just hope that you don't relapse. I was so happy about that because if I was going to have the transplant, I would have had to move to Brisbane because they didn't offer those health services in Townsville at the time, which for anyone who doesn't know, Townsville is about a 14 to 15 hour drive from Brisbane, so we would have had to have moved our family down there temporarily while I had the treatment. So we were like, yep, sweet, awesome, I'm not having the transplant, I'm in remission. I was still super self-conscious, I still had no hair, I was still wearing a wig every day, but I was better, and I was so happy about that. It took me about another 6 months and I was totally off all medications. And yeah, I was doing so much better. Eventually, I went back to school. I fought really hard to go back to school. Unfortunately, when you have chemotherapy, because your immune system is eradicated basically over and over again, you have to be really careful of infection. So you're not able to go out into public places that are dirty. So no shopping centres, no movie cinemas, no pools, nothing like that. You have to be super careful. Anytime you have to be away from people that have coughs and colds and things. So even when I was out of hospital, it was very difficult to catch up and see friends and family because, it had to be at home. I couldn't go to a public place, or if I did, it would have to be in a very open environment where I wasn't enclosed with people that were sick potentially. Every time I came home from the hospital, Mum and Dad would have to basically bleach the entire house and clean it. I wasn't allowed to touch my dogs or anything like that because they carry dirt and infections. So even that, I wasn't allowed to hug my boyfriend at the time, kiss my boyfriend at the time, which was a very big deal to me. Wasn't allowed to hug my friends. I wasn't, all that sort of thing. You can imagine I was basically wrapped in cotton wool for 6 months and even longer. But eventually, after about another 3 months after the initial treatment, I went back to school. I was wearing my wig every day at school, which was, very uncomfortable for me, especially in Townsville. It's very hot, it's very humid. It was awful. And one day I remember my wig. So I'd been wearing it for the best part of 6 to 8 months, and it was starting to look ratty and disgusting. And I said to Mum, I really want to get a new one. I can't go to school with the short hair. Everyone's going to think I'm a dyke. Everyone's going to think I'm a lesbian. And I know that's just awful, but that's what I said. And I've since become a lot more educated about gender and things, but back then that's the way I thought, and I thought that everyone would think I was a lesbian if I had short hair, and I was just so upset about that. And my mum was like, you're ridiculous, Chelsea, you can't spend another $600 to $700 on a wig when your hair's it was about sort of pixie cut length. And she said, you've just got to own it, you've got to embrace what you've been through, you need to deal with it, and you need to just get your ass back to school. And So I went to the hairdressers and I got it styled nicely, and then I went to school, and it was actually a real big weight off my shoulders because everyone was so lovely and gave me so much, beautiful compliments and things, and it was just really nice the way everyone treated me. And I just realized that there was no reason for me to be acting the way that I was, and I was just lucky to be alive. So basically, after that, I got on with my life. I graduated high school. I started university, but ended up deferring because I just wasn't ready to study. But I was then working 3 jobs. So I was working as a bar manager at an Italian restaurant in the city in Townsville. I was working at a nightclub in Townsville, and I was also working at Novo Shoes in Townsville. So I was full on, making money, partying with my friends. I had just recently started dating Dirk, who is still my partner now. And I was having regular blood tests every sort of 4 to 6 weeks to basically just check everything, make sure I was okay. I was still seeing my hematologist regularly. And then one day I went for my appointment and got a call that I had potentially relapsed due to my blood results and that I needed to come back in. So I remember I was at work at the time, and my beautiful boss, Katie, was just like, go. I had no idea what was going on. Basically, they just said, they didn't tell me anything over the phone, but they said, you need to come back in. And I just knew, straight away what had happened. And she told me to go. And I called my mum and dad and Dirk, and we went to the hospital. And it was just really hard to hear that I had it again. And I guess I was a little bit angry at the time that they hadn't just transplanted me in the first place. But if they had, I would have missed out on all the really awesome, high school years and time that I'd had with my friends and family in between. So I can't hold that against the doctors, but I was informed that I would be having the same 3 rounds of chemotherapy, but a lot stronger in Townsville, and then I would have to relocate to Brisbane for a transplant, which meant leaving my friends, leaving my boyfriend, leaving my jobs, uprooting my life and my family's life to go down there. Originally, Mum was just going to come down with me, and we were just going to stay at the Leukemia Foundation and get my treatment at the hospital, but my family decided that it was better for us all to be together. And in a way, I'm really glad that everyone came, because I don't think that we would have coped ourselves. It was a very traumatic, horrible time for our family. That entire probably 18 months of me getting chemotherapy again, going down to Brisbane and being transplanted, and then the recovery. My family went through some awful struggles, and I don't think we'll ever truly get over it, because it's not only me being sick, there's a financial toll, there's a mental toll on the entire family, there's the uncertainty of not knowing if you're going to be okay, there's the uncertainty of being away from all your family and friends. There's just so much that goes into it, and I don't think you can ever truly understand the loss and just helplessness that people experience when a loved one is diagnosed with cancer, and for the patient themselves watching their family go through that and knowing that it's their fault and that it's nothing that they can do to help or change it, it's awful. So after I had 3 more rounds of chemotherapy in Townsville, we went down to Brisbane, where I received a bone marrow transplant. So when you have a bone marrow transplant, basically they I'll go through from the start. So you go down and you have what's called a BMT workup, a bone marrow transplant workup. So they basically test every organ in your body. You get a heart, lungs, your skin. They biopsy your urine, your feces. Everything is tested to make sure basically that your body is strong enough and well enough to withstand having the transplant, because a transplant entails full body radiation, chemotherapy, and lots of other drugs as well, so which can have awful effects on your kidneys, your liver, your heart. So you've just got to be in a pretty good health to begin with. I was lucky that I was young and in reasonably good health, so my organs were all very strong, and I was okay to have the transplant. Some people become so critically unwell with their chemotherapy that they're too unstable to even have a transplant. So the disease has to be managed with chemotherapy alone, and a lot of those people don't survive or have, are given a certain period of time where they're going to pass away. They create a full body mold of you. So you go and basically they mold with it's paper mache, and they create a mold of your body, and they then, when you have radiation, they use that mold to put you in place in the radiation room, because you're getting full body radiation, and you have to be in the exact same position every time you receive the radiation, because if you need to ensure that every part of your body is being hit with the exact same dose. Some people even get tattoos, like the radiologist will tattoo their chest. They didn't do it to me because I was a young girl, and they just drew it on with Sharpie, but they tattoo some people's chests so that they can line it up with the laser, and ensure that they're getting that person in the exact same spot every time. So part of your BMT workup is that you go and you have this full body mold made, which is crazy. Like, you have to sit there for hours, and they literally put paper. I'm saying paper mache, but it's some sort of fancy like medical bandage or something, and they bandage you up and they create the mold, and then they cut it off you, and it's insane. So yeah, they do that. Sorry, I'm just trying to look where I'm up to on my notes. And then basically you're given 2 weeks to rest before they start because the donor has to have a whole heap of medications and things to get them ready to donate their bone marrow. So you have about 2 weeks off between the workup and when you actually have your transplant, before you start. So while they do those work up the donor. So we had 2 weeks in Brisbane, and a week in we got a call to find out. So before I say that part, I don't have any full blood siblings, so I was not able to get a donor that was from my family or related to me. All of my siblings are step siblings, and they decided that I would require a unrelated donor. So basically, they put my information on a donor registry. It's an international registry, and they find someone who matches with you, basically. They had found me a 10-10 match at the time, which was great, and it was someone in Germany. There's a lot of people in Europe in the registry, so it was all good to go. It was all booked in, but then a week into my 2-week rest, we got a call to say that the donor had to pull out for whatever reason. So we were kind of up Schitt's Creek because we were down there. I'd had the workup, and we didn't have a donor. I was becoming increasingly more unwell while we were waiting, and my doctors were able to find me another donor, but it was not 100% match, which is why I have a lot of the issues that I have today. So it was, the way he explained it to me, it was about an 80% match, and it was a male from, I think, Germany, that they ended up getting this bone marrow from. There is no way that I can contact him. It's through a registry. It's anonymous. I have thought about it a few times, but yeah, it's all from what I've been told from the Leukemia Foundation. At that time, it was not legal for me to get his details. So I don't know who my donor was. It was anonymous because it was through the registry. But this 80% match was the only option because there was no one else that fit my blood counts. I'm not a whole heap sure on the tests that they use to determine who's right for you, but I know it has a lot to do with genes, and so it's all very complicated. But yeah, he was the only option, and it was an only 80% sort of match, which is why I have what's called graft versus host disease, which is what I'll get into a little bit later, which is what I'm still living with today. Having the transplant was the most horrific thing that I've ever experienced. I was so unwell. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, and if I was ever relapsed again, I would rather be palliated than go through it again. I was just so sick for so long. I couldn't walk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sit up, I was just, when I was having my radiation, so the transplant consists, like I said, of 3 days of full body radiation, and then you have the transplant, which itself is just actually an IV infusion, and then the next day you do like 2 weeks of methotrexate. So the days that I was having the radiation, I was so sick and weak that on the last day they actually had to tape with duct tape my head up to the chair, because they couldn't have anyone in there holding my head up, obviously, because otherwise they would be being radiated too, and I was too sick and weak to hold my head upright. I was so nauseated. I just used to cry constantly. I was so sick. I couldn't stay awake for more than 4 hours at a time. I was so exhausted. I remember I would just wake up in the morning in hospital, and the first thing I would think was just, I feel sick. And I know that just sounds so dramatic, but I was just so nauseated. I just can't even explain it. It was just like all consuming. It was just awful. And I just used to cry every morning. I just would cry. I'd wake up before Mum would get there, because at the time my family was staying in the Leukemia Foundation provided accommodation. They're a great charity, side note, and if you can ever donate to them, please do. They helped my family through so much. They put my whole entire family up in a beautiful unit while I was getting this treatment, and they didn't have to pay a cent for it. They constantly provided my family with gifts, presents, food hampers. Like, they would help with Mum and Dad's bills, just everything, like the relocation costs, anything you can think of, they would help or find a way. We didn't obviously have a car while we were there, and they had a Leukemia Foundation car which they lend out to patients and their families when they need it. Like, it's such an amazing service, and they have counsellors and psychologists and social workers and just anything you can think of. They put on events for the families, like not only for the patients but the families and the siblings of patients, little kids that are watching their sister get all this attention and not themselves. They put on, it's just amazing. But yeah, I would Mum would come in every day and she would spend every day at the hospital with me, while Dad was obviously still working, and I would just cry every day. Every day I was just so depressed. I guess the hardest part is watching your family go through so much pain and not being able to do anything, and knowing that it's your fault. And I know it's not my fault, but watching your family. My mum gave up her dream job, and my sisters both developed really bad mental health issues. They were ripped out of their schools and brought down here, and I know at the time they harboured a lot of resentment towards me, because they were young and they didn't understand, and I know they still do, and I know they don't want to, but I know that they do deep down, and it's really hard to feel like you're the reason that your family's so unhappy. And my parents, since all this has happened, ended up losing their home in Townsville, and a lot of things. My dad's had a mental breakdown, basically. He is no longer working, and it all kind of stems back from these me being unwell, and it's really hard to watch your family go through that. The financial difficulty, the emotional difficulty, watching them feel like they can never sort of move on from it, and sometimes I even myself feel like it's still hanging over my head, especially when I'm limited in what I can do in each day and that sort of thing. But I guess I just have to be grateful that I'm here and I still have my family, and that's all you can do is just take it day by day. Some days are worse than others, but it's better than the alternative. It was just a really, really awful time in my life. I tried my best to put on a brave face for my friends and my family, and at one point it did get too much. I took a whole heap of tablets and ended up really, really unwell, and it got too much for me. I ended up in hospital. We won't go into that, but it was very, very hard for our family. After the transplant, you have to stay close to they say you have to hang around for 100 days post-transplant, so they can monitor you for any signs of deterioration, and that's when you're the most likely to experience graft versus host disease and any potential infections or complications from the transplant. So a lot of the time, because I had so many complications with graft versus host disease and also infections, I was in hospital for most of those 100 days, and then even when I was out of the one time of 100 days, I still had to stay near the hospital because I was still really, really unwell in and out of hospital. I think if you look on my profile, I've had like 40 admissions to the Royal or something. Like, I was just in and out, like all the time. It was just awful. ended up moving to Brisbane because of this. It was clear that I was not going to be able to get the care in Townsville that I needed, and while I was still so critically unwell and everything, it was just we had to move down here. And I gave Dirk an ultimatum. I said, look, I've got to stay here. You can come and be with me, or, I understand totally 100% you should leave, because this is not going to be easy and this is going to be hard. And he was so supportive through the whole transplant. And I'm so lucky to have him, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be alive today, honestly. He was just, I owe him my life. I owe him everything. He supported me, he listened to me, and he ended up moving to Brisbane too. He also came and visited me a couple of times while I was having my transplant, but it was very upsetting for him to see me that unwell, and I asked him to not come back until I was out of hospital, out of the 100 days, just because I was so unwell, and it was upsetting me seeing him upset as well. So, anyway, I had this transplant, got through the 100 days, I got home eventually. My parents brought they didn't buy, they rented a property in Albany Creek in Brisbane, and we moved out of the leukemia accommodation and into a home, and we started to sort of try and get back into normal life. And I think I had kept it together for so long that, oh my God, Archie. I'd kept it together for so long. I know I'm bursting into tears now, but at the time I had kept it together really well for my family, and apart from the episode where I took a lot of tablets, but for the 6 to 8 months leading up to that, I had been really strong and been putting on a really brave face, and it was kind of once everyone got back to work and school that I really hit rock bottom. I became really, really depressed. I was at home. I was experiencing graft versus host disease in my skin, my lungs, and my stomach. So graft versus host disease is basically a condition that lots of people that have transplants get, and it's where your body basically is rejecting the transplanted organ or whatever you get transplanted. The way that a transplant works is because anything that's foreign, that's put into your body, obviously your immune system is trained to fight it off. So what they do is they weaken your immune system with the chemotherapy and the radiation and the immunosuppression drugs. And then they put this new foreign body in my case it was the bone marrow, and then they slowly let your immune system come back. They slowly wean the drugs. Obviously you're not getting chemotherapy and radiation anymore, and they see what happens basically. In my case, my body came back and was attacking it. So they've got to get this kind of balance where your body, you have enough immune system to be able to live everyday life and not be sick every day and all the time, but at the same time they don't want you to have too much of an immune system, because otherwise you're fighting off your bone marrow or whatever organ is transplanted. It's that's basically my life in a nutshell right now. Still I'm still on immunosuppression medication, and I still struggle with chronic graft versus host disease in my lungs. So quite often people will notice that I'm breathless. I also have asthma, so that doesn't help as well. But I get breathless at times. I have a very low exercise comment, exercise tolerance, like in cardiovascular exercise. So basically anything that makes you puffed makes me breathless. I spend my life not being able to breathe, basically, and the treatment for it, there isn't any. It's basically masking the symptoms with prednisone, and then obviously any healthcare professional will know that prednisone has just awful effects on your body. Prednisone is a steroid. So I will be on prednisone for the rest of my life, and it's all about just trying to keep it at the lowest dose possible but still being able to function in everyday life. So it's all a very balancing act. It's all very difficult. I get a lot of chronic pain associated with my chronic graft versus host disease. I get a lot of side effects from the prednisone that I'm on, and quite often if I have to have higher doses of it for if I have a flare-up or a chest infection, I get regular recurring chest infections with my graft versus host. I have to go on higher doses of prednisone, which in turn makes the side effects worse. So the side effects I commonly get, I get really dry eyes. Quite often I wake up in the morning and my eyes are so dry that I can't open them. I have to put eye drops in all the time. I get what's called moon face, which is quite common with people that take prednisone. So basically your body stores fluid in really odd places. So quite often, like, my face will look a bit swollen. It also, you store it in the back of your neck, your arms, and in your stomach area. So it is fluid, and it's a side effect of prednisone. I'm not going to go into the science behind it, but basically you store fluid. Your skin becomes like tissue paper, so see-through. So that's why a lot of the times you can see like my veins through my skin. That's another side effect. There's so many, but these are the ones that commonly I get. It can stop you from being able to sleep. It can stop you from having libido. It can affect your libido, as do all of the immunosuppression drugs as well. Being on an immune suppression means I'm vulnerable to being sick, obviously. My immune system's suppressed, so anyone gets a cold, I am most definitely going to catch it. When I had my transplant, I had to be revaccinated, so that's another interesting one. After having my bone marrow transplant, I actually changed blood type. So originally I was A positive, and now I'm O positive. O negative. I'm O negative. I was A positive. And that's really interesting. Hey, so you take on the donor's blood group of whatever they were. So my donor was an O negative. And you have to be totally revaccinated. So in those, 6 to 12 months before you can be revaccinated, it's crucial that you are so careful, which is why we talk about herd immunity and people being vaccinated, because other people being vaccinated protects me when I'm not able to be vaccinated. I am now fully revaccinated, but there was a time when I was unvaccinated because of the transplant I'd had, so I had to be so careful. What else? What other side effects do I have? I feel like there's so many that I just it's just kind of my everyday life now, and it's not really a side effect. It's just part of life. The biggest one for me is the muscle wastage and degeneration. So prednisone affects your ability to build muscle, and it also breaks down muscle that you have. So, excuse me, just choked on my spit. That is why it's so hard for me to build muscle, and it's so hard for me to store it as well. So when I'm, I look emancipated a lot of the time. I can't gain weight. That's another side effect of the immunosuppression drugs. So it's just all these sort of things that really, really inhibit my everyday life. I'm constantly tired. I'm constantly putting eye drops in my eyes. I'm constantly breathless. I can't go up 2 flights of stairs at work without needing to rest. It's just, it's debilitating, and it can be really hard, especially in the winter, where my asthma flares up as well. So sometimes it's just too much. I can't even, getting dressed in the morning is too much, and I can't breathe. I'll walk to the bathroom and I get breathless. It's a day by day thing. Every day is different. Some days are worse than others. Some days I flare up and some days I don't. But it's definitely exacerbated when I have, exacerbated when I have chest infections and am affected by my asthma as well. So yeah, I think, another thing that I had wanted to talk about was the other side effects that I'd had as a result of this transplant. So I had what's called Bell's palsy, which I've been into on this before, but with no immune system, obviously you're open to viral illnesses, and Bell's palsy is considered a viral illness, and it can flare up at times of extreme stress in your life, which I was definitely going through a stressful time at the time. So it was where half of my face was paralyzed. I did get a lot of the movement back, but if you do watch my face, my right side has a lot less movement than the left, and I am actually going to a doctor to try and sort of see if I can get something that will help with that, to sort of relax both sides, so then it will look a bit more similar, but that's an ongoing thing, and I'll keep you guys updated on that. I also got viral meningitis, I think it was last year or the year before. So I've had to have a few lumbar punctures and things. So there's pretty much every procedure under the sun. I've had endoscopy, colonoscopy, lumbar puncture, bone marrow aspirate, surgery, laparoscopic surgery, central line, PICC line, everything. I've had so many complications. I've left so many out, and I can even think of so many in my head now that I haven't even spoken about. But this video is nearly gone for an hour, so yeah, we'll discuss it another time. So I am also infertile, like I said before. I will never be able to conceive a child by myself. The only way Derek and I will be able to have children is if we adopt or get a donor egg or a surrogate or that sort of thing. So that's sort of something that we've got to look into in the future. I eventually got back into life. I was seeing a psychologist, which I still see. I went back to uni. I completed my degree. I fucking worked so hard to complete my degree. I spent many a night in a hospital room working on assignments. I was sitting an online exam while I was inpatient at the Royal Brisbane ICU for a chest pneumonia. I worked so hard to get that degree, and I remember in my interview, when I was being interviewed by the NUM, who is no longer my NUM now, but I just was talking about how passionate I was to finally, get to start my career after everything that I'd been through, and I just burst into tears because I was just so grateful and happy to have even completed my degree, let alone being considered for a job. So I ended up getting a job in the intensive care unit at the the Redcliffe Hospital, and I have worked there ever since. I've been there for about 2.5 years now. and I'm loving it. But I guess it is really hard to balance my life, my chronic health issues, and to be able to still turn up, show up for work, be on point, and then have everything going on in the background. And I will do another video about how I deal with it, and things that I do to make it a bit easier. But for me, it's more about just maintaining this healthy lifestyle. I've been so blessed to be able to be given a second and third chance at life. So I really want to look after my body. Yeah, it's just, I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful that I have a beautiful fiance who has supported me through everything and continues to support me and be an absolute angel. He's always so understanding with everything I need. I love him so much, and I'm so grateful for him, and I have such an amazing family that supported me through everything. And even though we're still not out of the woods with my father's health issues and that sort of thing, but we, you know, when we need it, our family really stick together and support each other. And I'll never be able to thank them enough for everything they did for me while I was so unwell, but also I'll never be able to apologize to them enough either for everything that they had to go through while I was so unwell. So thank you for listening to my story. I know it's really long, and I totally understand if you skip through most of it, because I probably would have if I was watching someone else's. And I hope it wasn't too depressing, and I will do another video about sort of my tips for dealing with my chronic health issues and anyone else that has chronic health issues, and also sexual health post transplant and that sort of thing. So yeah, just let me know, give me feedback on this video, but be gentle. Thank you for listening.